All right, everybody, welcome back to the Krueg Show, Niners Nation style. It is Thursday at 3 o'clock, and that means Kyle Posey stops by from Niners Nation, one of my favorite segments every week as we chop it up with Kyle and talk about basically all things 49ers. What's going on, Kyle? How are you?
Doing well, man. It's June 16th. When we're in the middle of nothing when it comes to football, do you miss it? Do you enjoy it? Like, how does that work for you?
You know what? It's funny because I'm like in football mode, straight through the from training camp all the way through the draft and then the mini camps. And then when you get to this time of the year, I think it's a great time to kind of shut it down. Right. Kind of shut it down a little bit. If there was any month of the year that I would just be like, you know what? I don't need to talk Niners. It's probably from, let's say April, the second half of May through the second half of June. And usually you'll find that's when coaches and scouts and everything take their vacation with their family because there's not a lot that happens in June. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's a good time to detox and think about it, man. We talk about how the grind that the players go through. We're doing the same thing. We never look away, essentially, from August to just around, you said, like the end of May. I asked you that because this week I have been kind of missing it. I've been watching just old games, just random players. I've been watching like Lincoln Riley's offense at Oklahoma, or today I was watching T. Higgins because I just love watching him play football. So that's the reason I asked.
Now, what do you like? What do you like about T. Higgins? This is the Bengal receiver who played at Clemson.
Right. The way he catches the ball, the way he protects the ball when he catches the ball. I like the way that he steps on the toes of defensive backs. He has so little movement, so little wasted movement when he runs routes. And you just don't see that from young receivers, how just precise he is with his route running. I love it, man. He's going to be special. And I know this isn't a Bengals thing, but if I'm the Bengals, I'm not paying Jesse Bates and I'm paying T. Higgins.
Jesse Bates, the Wake Forest safety, you're not paying him, but you're paying T. Higgins. I mean, I love T. Higgins too. It's funny. I said that I shut it down. I did watch some film a couple nights ago of Tay Martin, who's the undrafted free agent wide receiver out of Oak State. And I believe in this kid. I realize it's an uphill battle, right? Because you got Danny Gray and you got Ray McLeod, and obviously you got Juwan Jennings and Brendan Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. And some teams only keep 5 receivers. Right. So there's a decent chance that Tay Martin is not going to have a chance to make the roster this summer. And then I went back and looked at, I watched that bowl game that he played in against Notre Dame. And I thought, you know what? I don't care how many receivers are in camp, and I don't care what their credentials look like. And I don't care what round or what – this guy didn't go in any round. He went undrafted. Tay Martin went in. I'm a believer. And I know the 40 time doesn't look like much, and he didn't even do the upper body lifting because he probably doesn't have a lot of upper body strength. It's pretty lean. But man, when you watch him on film and you watch the routes and you watch the quickness in and out of the breaks and you watch him pluck the ball with his hands and you've seen him doing it in the Big 12, and then you're seeing him doing it in the Big 12 title game. Then you're seeing him do it in the bowl game against Notre Dame in a pretty good secondary. I gotta think that Tay Martin, who impressed me at the minicamp, if he's healthy and a go in training camp, man, he wore 83 in the minicamp. I'll be looking for 83 this summer.
I'll have to keep an eye on number 83. So if he wants to make the roster, he's going to have to be good on special teams. He's going to have to make some kind of impact in the third phase. And then think about it. So the top dogs, Ayuk, Deebo, Jennings, those guys are going to get the majority of the reps because they have to build a rapport with Trey Lance. So that means guys like Tay Martin on the outside looking in, they have to make spectacular plays. Like, they have to really stand out with those limited reps that they're going to get, and they're not going to have the luxury of playing with Lance. They're going to be catching those passes from Sudfeld and maybe Purdy. But it is interesting when you just frame it on the outside looking in, and just these lesser known wideouts just fighting for a spot, just knowing how little reps that they're going to get, man.
Yeah. Oh, and it's going to be a fierce competition because, I mean, Ayuk, Debo, Jennings, McLeod, Danny Gray, I think those guys are going to make it. So there's 5. But then you get Marcus Johnson, who wore 6 at minicamp and has played in the league for a few years. And then you got Austin Mack. You got Keyshawn Johnson. You got Malik Turner. And then you got a couple undrafted receivers, Tay Martin and Taysir Mack. And it's going to be a good competition. And maybe it's a competition for no spots. It's one of those. It might be a competition for simply, run on the practice squad. But based on what I've seen, I would be shocked if Tay Martin doesn't continue to make plays in the preseason for the 49ers. They had their state of the franchise deal this week, and I didn't attend it. I wasn't invited, but I did watch it. It was like about an hour and 20 minutes long, and it's a lot of fluff. It's a lot of, hey, there's a mall going up across the street. Right. Great. Hey, we're going to get the World Cup. By the way, 2026 World Cup, one of the venues is Levi Stadium. That was announced today. They're trying to get Super Bowl 60 and 60 or 61. They won't get them both, but they're trying to get the Super Bowl back. That came out of this. There were a number of interesting little nuggets that came out. One that surprised me, one that excited me. I'll give you the one that surprised me first, Kyle, and that was John Lynch talking about and recapping the draft, said, we pretty much got who we wanted, except we had one team trade in front of us at the last second and take our guy. And there was a team that traded in front of the 49ers, and it was Cincinnati at pick 60 in the second round, and they traded up for Nebraska's corner, Cam Taylor-Britt. And then I didn't watch a lot of Britt in the pre-draft, but just watching him in the draft video, you could see the talent, and he was a very, very impressive player. The Niners went with Drake Jackson with the next pick overall, and who knows? They claim they love him. I didn't think he looked that great in the minicamp. We'll see in July. But I thought that was interesting. It's like I'm not getting why you would go that route to highlight that, other than to say, full disclosure, I guess. I'm not really sure what the benefit of Lynch disclosing that. If you're Drake Jackson, does that make you feel good? I don't know. That was a weird one.
Why? What's the point? Who are you helping here? Who are you moving forward by saying that? It was strange to hear him say that, because there was just no real reason for him to say that. I watched a ton of Cam Britt, and I remember on that Friday on draft day, he was the first name that I mentioned. Like, you
liked him. You were all over him. Yeah.
He was very good, and he is going to be very good. And he was exactly what the 49ers needed. I would have loved him. I would have taken him over Drake Jackson. But you mentioned how Jackson hasn't kind of stood out so far, but can they spin this and maybe put a chip on the shoulder? Was that the ulterior motive here?
I don't think so, but it is interesting. Jackson, to me, is one of the more interesting topics going into camp, in that if you listen to Nick Bosa, he sings his praises. If you listen to DeMeco Ryans, he sings his praises. If you listen to the special teams coach who talked at minicamp, I thought he was one of the guys that kind of sung his praises. Kyle Shanahan talked him up. When I watched him, I was looking for like a super fast speed rusher that looked like D Ford. I saw a guy who almost looked like a combo end tackle with maybe a few extra pounds of bad weight, who didn't have a lot of moves. I don't know. We'll see. I will say this. I've always been taught by the people who are more in the know than me, that don't put a lot of credence in individual workouts, don't put a lot of credence into the combine, and don't put a lot of credence into the minicamp, because minicamp there's no pads, and this is a sport that's played with pads and helmets. And if you start you want to draw conclusions on conditioning in minicamp, go right ahead. But as soon as you get into anything beyond conditioning, be very circumspect, because you can make a lot of incorrect evaluations if you're going off minicamp.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. A player is going to make one splash play, and this happens a lot for the media in practices when they attend. So you'll remember that one splash play and ignore everything that happens for the rest of the practice. So I feel like there's too many hot takes when we do attend these hour and a half practices that just mean, what do they mean? Like, nobody's going to remember these practices in a month and a half when the pads are on and we're talking about potential preseason games and joint practices with the Vikings. So, yeah, I agree there that there's just not much to take away here. But speaking of the State of the Union, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings talking about a little Trey Lance. And they asked Ayuk what he thought, and he was talking about his leadership. He's talking about he was taking control of the locker room, and he saw the shift with Lance earlier this season, and I guess earlier in the offseason. And he said we have a special quarterback. So obviously there's a lot of fluff here, but I don't think Ayuk is going to throw that out there just for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, he's all in on Trey for sure. And that's great to see because, I mean, a receiver all in on his quarterback is exactly the kind of relationship you want because when the ball's in the air.
Paycheck and he knows it.
Yeah. And also, if you're a quarterback, man, you want those receivers to be all about you and all about making you look good. I mean, because let's be honest, in the course of an NFL game, if you throw 20 passes in a game, how many of those are 50-50 balls? Probably at least a half dozen. Probably at least 5 or 6 out of the 20 are 50-50 balls where, you know what, you're putting it out there and you're trusting your receiver to go get it for you. And if you have a receiver that has great feelings about you, that can only help. So I love to hear that from Ayuk. And I loved what I've seen. First of all, I love what I hear from Trey. That's first and foremost, as far as, you can tell by the way he's talking about his experience that he's got people in his ear, from Steve Young to Jerry Rice to coaches to players, but he doesn't seem at all, Kyle, at all overwhelmed by all the information and all the advice he's getting. I think that the ability to sit him for that first year and just let him watch is going to pay off so well for the 49ers this year. I know there are people that were saying, well, if he had played, he'd be further along. He might be further along, but he also may have some bad habits and he may have some scar tissue. Right now, he has 0 scar tissue. And scar tissue builds up when you start getting injured and you start getting keyholed by 300-pound defensive linemen. And all of a sudden you can hear footsteps and you can feel that pain ahead of time. And you don't want that. You don't want those negative thoughts. You want him to learn the system, know where to go with the ball, what to do, the intricacies and the nuances of a very complex system before the bullets start flying, so to speak, before it's live, before there's guys who are paid huge dollars to take his head off are out there chasing him around. So I think that the 49ers drafted the right person and they have the right process. Now we're going to find out, do they have the right player? And that I don't think we can say definitively yet. There's indications of good, but I definitely feel like they have the right person and the right process. Now it's a matter of, his ability to play the position, which is obviously hardly just an afterthought. It's a major component. But you know what? Having the right person is a major component, because you could have a guy with all kinds of talent, but he's just not wired to work hard, or he's just not wired to lead, or he's just not wired to set the example for others, or he gets, overwhelmed by all the information and advice he's getting. It's pretty clear that Trey's the right guy, at least in their minds. The coaches, the other players, they feel like he can lead because he's put in the reps. He's demonstrated that he's a worker, and guys want to follow guys who are going to lead them in the right direction. I get the sense that they believe in Trey.
So public messaging matters for a quarterback, right? You talk about Trey Lance and he's saying all the right things. That's broadcasted to everyone, and the quarterback, no matter what you think, is the voice of the team. So I think it's a big deal. And I want to tie this all in. So how they're talking up Trey Lance to kind of how they were talking up Drake Jackson. Could we see a shift in the 49ers to the positive messaging all around for all of their players? Because even as early as last season, dating back to since Shanahan's taken over, there really hasn't been that. And by that, I mean, he has no problem saying, oh, so-and-so just didn't play very well, or so-and-so needs to improve. Or I wonder if now, with a young quarterback, with just a young team in general, I guess I should say a lot of younger players going to play, if the optimism is going to turn up a level and we're going to see a lot of public messaging that's just overly positive and overly optimistic.
It's interesting. Is it a conscious decision on the part of the organization to try to pump up some of the younger players with confidence? That might be a great question for Kyle in training camp this summer. It definitely makes you wonder. I will say this about this team. Last year they talked a lot about running it back and a lot of, different, things putting pressure. Yeah, I hate that too because it's a different team with different coaches. Yeah, and you didn't win. Yeah, that's even the more salient point. You didn't win. What are you running it back for? But this year it seemed like it was less about setting any kind of concrete goals. Like they don't want to put that pressure on Trey. Like they understand that while they want to win and they feel like they've got a winning caliber roster, that history says that you don't win in the NFL with a first year quarterback. Technically he's in the second year, but first year as a starter. I'm eager to see what he looks like this year. I'd like to see in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the year indications that tell us either that they can win this year with him or that they really can't. And I'm wondering if we'll see any indications that kind of define the answer to that question for us early in the year.
Oh, I think we'll know within the first 3 games what we have in Trey Lance, and not just this year, but I'm under the mindset that for essentially any player, you can tell what you have in them within a game almost. But the 3-game sample size for Trey Lance with everything that they're probably going to do with him after having the entire offseason, I just think that we're going to know pretty quickly whether he can play. And I feel like whether that's Trevor Lawrence, whether that's Zach Wilson, like the quarterbacks from last year, the rookies, like we know what they're going to be more than likely. Sure, they might evolve or they might go up or down a level to a degree. But I think for the most part, like we know who those guys are, and I don't think that's going to be any different with Trey Lance. He has the best situation. He has a lot of talent around him. So if anything, we can project him higher.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I don't hear a lot of people making that point, by the way. It seems like the talent surrounding these young quarterbacks is not just like, well, that's a factor. That's like the factor.
Right.
And like people talk about it like, this guy's got a little bit more talent. That's a major factor. It was a major factor in Mac Jones playing well last year. It was a major factor in Trevor Lawrence not playing well last year. Your surrounding cast matters greatly. One of the interesting headlines from the week I thought came from George Kittle, Kyle, who said that he'd like to see 2 bye weeks. He's like, his quote was 17 games is a lot. It's a lot of games with 1 bye. I'm advocating for 2 byes. The physical toll, you feel it week in and week out. This is a guy who would be in the know. I mean, it's a tough sport played by tough guys, but I heard a couple other guys comment that I think it was Trent Williams earlier in the minicamp said, guys, the adding of 1 game matters a lot. And then when you add in the fact that, we played it deep into the playoffs, those extra games matter a lot on your body. We don't really account for that, how many games a team played the year before. But that's a major factor. And I think Kittle's onto something here. It's like, why not? Why not stretch out? The NFL season already has an arbitrary ending. Why not stretch it into, the second week of February? And somebody said, hey, you know what? Then maybe have that day after, have the President's Day holiday be like a holiday, after the Super Bowl to let America rest after its, biggest sporting event of the year, have a 3-day weekend. What do you think of the idea of adding a bye week and just extending the season and maybe starting it at the exact same time, but just extend it 1 more week into February?
So think about how long they go, these players, probably the beginning of August. And it's, let's just say, physical contact every day for an hour and a half, 2 hours, all the way through January, which is essentially what it comes down to. And it's a lot more than that. But there's only 1 week that you get off in between that. There's no way that is normal, right? And yes, they're being compensated, but if we're really cared about the person, if we really care about their well-being, adding an extra week should be a no-brainer. And I imagine they're going to fight and claw for that in the next CBA once that's up. So the NFL, it feels like it's inevitable that they're going to add a game, and the players should ask for another bye week. It is crazy that they don't have that. I understand them Kittle's been banged up, so he has an argument. Trent Williams has been banged up, so he has an argument as well. And I don't know. It comes down to like money and marketing, the TVs, but there's no reason not to have another bye week because if anything, the NFL could have more standalone games. I'm in Arizona and they're building a sports book right next to me. So that's what it's going to come down to. They want to get more eyes on these standalone games and gambling. So if you're going to do that, fine, but reward the players with an extra bye week.
Yeah, let them rest their bodies. I mean, my goodness. I mean, the conditions in the NFL, I mean, these guys, it's bad enough there's no guaranteed contracts. It's bad enough that the average NFL career, which is, by the way, the most popular sport in America by a wide margin, is like 3 years. And then it's unfortunate that these guys who are gladiators and play this incredibly brutal sport oftentimes have to go find, another career, after their NFL career is over. When their body's beat up and sometimes their heads beat up. And so, to do anything you can to kind of manage the workload and acknowledge the physical nature. I mean, this is not just a physical sport. This is a contact sport. And I think they ought to really consider giving these guys a little bit more rest. And if you're going to add games, my goodness, add a bye week for sure. Though we might want to add a bye week, even if there weren't a 17th game. You and Akash Avaranthan and Avaranthan, or maybe I'm butchering his last name. If I am, I apologize to Akash. But you guys have an episode of the Shanna Plan, and it's out this week at Niners Nation, and it's pretty cool. I like this conversation. You guys kind of went into, who's the most underrated Niner, who's the best player on the team, who's the key new addition to the 49ers, who's a player that potentially could surprise and take a leap in a prove it type year. Really interesting piece. It's up there right now. Let's go through it. I'd like to throw in some of my own answers. Who did you have as the most underrated 49er? Why don't we start there? And who did Akash go with?
Who did I have as the most underrated 49er? Let me look real quick. I think Akash had Daniel Brunskill, which is interesting. So he threw out Jimmy Ward. He threw out Juwan Jennings. But, I mean, Brunskill he gets so much crap just because, think about it. These guys miss 3 blocks a game out of 60 plays. And if that happens, most of the fans are like, what is this guy doing? He's terrible. If any other job, you have a success rate of over 90% and you're viewed as bad at your job, that just doesn't happen. But there was a couple other ones. Who did I say? Did I say Kinlaw? Oh, no, I said Azeez. That's my guy. That's right. I think Azeez Al-Shire legitimately was one of the 10 best linebackers last year. And it sounds like hyperbole, but if you just think about the impact that he had, if you think about the plays that he made and how their defense didn't drop off, it got better when he was in the lineup, generating turnovers, stopping the run at an elite clip, not allowing explosive plays. And a lot of times when you don't allow explosive plays, that's because you're strong down the middle. Jimmy Ward, Jaquiski Tartt, Fred Warner, and Azeez Al-Shire. So only one linebacker, I believe, in the NFL had more tackles for loss than him. And again, this is a guy who is in his third year, fresh off of a serious knee injury in college. So we're just starting to see his talent level. I think he's incredible. And if I'm the 49ers, I do not go into this season without paying him because he's going to be very expensive after this year.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I love Brunskill too. I think Brunskill's a great answer by Akash. But if I was going with an answer, I would have gone with the same guy you went with, Azeez Al-Shire. I just think that you can talk to hardcore Niner fans about the Niners, and his name never comes up. And you could go into any Pro Football Focus, you name it. You name the group of football fans that you think is really, really sharp, and you could talk 49er football. You'd be talking for 40, 50 minutes before Azeez Al-Shire's name ever comes up. I think he is far and away the most underrated. I agree with you wholeheartedly. To me, he might be one of the most underrated players in the NFL. Forget just the 49ers. I mean, Azeez Al-Shire, as you said, undrafted rookie free agent, and he was this productive in college. People say, well, he must not have been good in college. No, look it up. The guy had
most tackles.
He had 433 tackles or something like that in college. He had a ridiculous number of tackles. And then, seeing his story, I YouTubed him when I saw him for the first time in camp, and I stumbled onto a local TV news story about how there was a grease fire in the kitchen of his home, and he ran into the burning house and saved his entire family. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I mean, unbelievable. And then, you know what? I'll tell you, the others, old football scout told me, if you really want to learn a little bit about how a player's wired, turn around on the practice field. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, turn around. He said, stop watching the guys in the field and their intensity, and watch the guys who are working on the side with coaches, usually because they have they're dinged up with an injury or they're being held out of practice. He said the variable energy level and focus of those guys is night and day. Some guys are out there with a hat backwards, kicking it around, telling jokes, fooling around, having fun. They're just kind of passing the time, getting a little sweat. Other guys look like it's, the Super Bowl and it's 3rd and goal, and they've got this determination look. And so every time I see guys on the side working out, I make sure that I walk over there and take a look at them, and not just how they're moving, but kind of the look on their face. So oftentimes they're not wearing a helmet, so you can see their face. Well, the other day at minicamp, there's Aziz, and I remembered that comment, and I turned around and I walked over to where he was working out, and this guy, Kyle, had the look of just total seriousness as he's running through these drills with, I don't even think it was a coach. I think he might have just been a conditioning guy. Might have been like an assistant strength and conditioning guy. But the look on his face was like deadly serious. And that tells me that he's all business right there. And so we see the results, and I'll say he's the most underrated player for that. But I just wanted to share that little anecdote because that's insider football. That's the kind of thing that the coaches see, that the scouts see, that the fans never see. That also tells you how a guy's wired. So that one stood out to me. Let's get to the – go ahead. I want your thought on that.
Well, no, I love that just because the 49ers in 2020, when they were here, they were in Arizona. They were practicing because it was during COVID, and they had to relocate in December. So I was able to go to those practices all month, and I don't get a chance to do that during the season. So they had an injury in December, and it was Juwan Jennings. And now that you say that, he looked like he was getting ready to play a game. He was not active. He was on the IR. He had no chance of playing, but he had to warm up. He was rehabbing. It was either a groin or a hamstring. But every day in practice, he was running around the field. He was sprinting. He was working to get back to 100%. Like, if you had no idea, you would have thought if he didn't work that hard, he was going to get cut the next day. Like, his work ethic, just for those couple of weeks, just to watch him work like that was incredible. And I'm glad you brought that up because now it's starting to click. Well, that's why Juwan Jennings played the way he did last year, because he always practices like that. He always plays like that. He plays like there's no tomorrow. And when you have that mindset, it's very tough to fail. So Aziz, Juwan, 7th rounder, undrafted free agent. That's how those guys have to make it. They know that. So it's pretty cool to know that they're wired like that. So me and Akash had a couple guys who we thought would be surprises. Bigger names, though. So he picked Javon Kinlaw. I went with Charvarius Ward. Who do you think is going to be the surprise for the 49ers this year?
The surprise? Wait, so he went with who again?
He went with Javon Kinlaw. So he thinks Javon Kinlaw is going to live up to his expectations this year. I think Charvarius Ward is going to go over the top of what people think he's capable of. Who do you got?
Those are good too. I'm going to go Ty Davis Price. Yeah. I think Ty Davis Price is going to, first of all, running backs don't have a ramp up period. For the most part, it's a simpler deal usually for the running backs. It's an instinctive position. And I just think that's an underrated player. And I think he's, LSU is such an awesome proving ground. The SEC is such an incredible conference, and this guy had a terrific year. And just another guy pretty serious about his craft. He's going to have to show up ready to roll because there's Mitchell and Wilson and Sermon and Hasty and Mason and Hughes-Check and him. But I really think he's the guy who's
right there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good backs here, but I say TDP. I think Ty Davis Price is going to be the player that kind of surprises this year. I would not be surprised. I guess I would be surprised, but he's the guy that I will predict to be the kind of the bust out surprise player. How about best player? Because to me, I got a different wrinkle on this. I think if you say best player on the team, it's easy to just go Trent Williams. Trent Williams, and then we can all just kind of say, oh, yeah, Trent Williams. But then other people, I think, would probably say Bosa. And there might be a few answers for Debo. But I got a guy who I think is the best player on the team that's none of those guys. And I want to hear yours first.
So I do say Trent Williams. And the reason I say that is because when I think best player, I think a guy that I can rely on, that I know is going to give me the best every time, that I know that even against the other team's best player, I don't have to worry about it. So if I'm calling plays for the 49ers, I don't have to worry about my left side. I know that I'm good. I know I can run the ball that way. I know I can slide my protection away from him and not have to worry about that. He gave up 1 sack all year last year. Sports Info Solutions keeps a stat called opponent stuffs. So essentially, if your man beats you and makes a tackle near the line of scrimmage, that happened once against him last year. He does not get beaten. And it's not like he's going against scrubs. If you just recall in training camp, whenever he goes against Nick Bosa one-on-one, Trent Williams wins. Whenever Nick Bosa goes against literally anybody else, that person doesn't stand a prayer. He is pretty easily the best player on the team to me in that sense. But how are you spinning it? What do you got?
Well, okay, I look at Trent Williams as an incredible talent. And he's one of the great players at his position for sure. I would notorious GAV says Trent is the best player at his position by far.
He is.
I'll give you that. And I'll say he's one of the most dependable players because you know what you're getting. But best, when I'm saying best, I'm thinking of when they're playing their best, who is the best? When they're playing when everybody's playing at the highest level they get to, who's the best player out there? And I'm going to say 57 Dre Greenlaw. Now, whoa. I know there are a lot of people that would say, Krug, you're nuts. He's not even the best linebacker. And you just talked up Aziz. And what about Fred Warner? But Dre Greenlaw has been hurt a lot. And so because of that, we kind of put him in a different category. But man, when I saw Dre Greenlaw hit the field late in the year, he didn't look like a very good linebacker. He didn't look like a Pro Bowl linebacker. He looked like an all-pro linebacker. He has instincts. He has 4.5 speed. He hits like a truck. He's intimidating as hell. Kyle Shanahan says he looks Mike Tyson. I think Greenlaw has instincts and athleticism and speed that you put it all together and he gets healthy and he plays. He's the best player. He flies around. He breaks down in space. He's one of the best I've ever seen at breaking down in space against an athlete, running back, wide receiver, brings that guy to the ground at will, separates guys from the football, hits like a truck, can play as a stacked backer in either spot. I just think I never see him like there's like some, Fred Warner's got great ability in coverage, but Fred Warner's, sometimes will take a wrong angle. I don't see Greenlaw take wrong angles. He's pure. He takes correct angles and then he detonates. And I just see a fast, physical, dominating, all-pro type linebacker who hasn't been able to stay on the field. If he had been able to stay on the field, I think he's the best linebacker they got. I think he's that good. So I know there'll be people go, what? I disagree. And that's fine. That's what we do these things for. But I'll say Dre Greenlaw, because when he's at his best, I think he is the best.
Here's what I'll say to that. During the regular season, the 13 games or whatever Aziz started, that was better football consistently over a long period of time than Greenlaw has ever played. When Greenlaw got back after he was healthy for those playoff games, he blacked out. I don't know what happened. I don't know what they gave him for breakfast, but that was the best he's ever played in his life.
So you noticed it too, huh?
There was no doubt about it. I do not disagree at all, because in my mind, Azeez Al-Shaair was better and should have started, but then Dre Greenlaw played and was approaching the line of scrimmage, like taking on linemen like a Mack truck. It was insane to see him play with that level of physicality, but I don't think he plays with that level, like those type of angles that you're talking about. He doesn't play that cleanly most of the time. A couple of weeks ago, when in his first game back, and maybe it was just because it was his first game back, there were a couple of times where Warner's like pushing him over. Jaquaski Tart had to come down. I remember specifically, he had to come down and move him over because Greenlaw wasn't even lining up the right way. Against the run, I feel like he does second guess himself a lot. But again, that's Greenlaw most of the time. Those 3 or 4 games, I don't know what got into him, but he was not making mistakes. He just was a Fred Warner clone, essentially. It was nuts. It would be nice to see him carry that over to next season. But I mean, that's the beauty of football, man. If we're talking about Fred Warner, who is the best linebacker in the NFL, Greenlaw, who has that ceiling but does not play to that ceiling consistently, and then Azeez, who just flashes playmaking ability every time he's on the field. They have one of the best problems to have when deciding which linebacker to leave on the field.
Yeah. Oh, and believe me, the kid they got from San Diego State, Segun Alubi, like if you told me that he was going to surprise people in camp, that would not shock me either. I mean, he moves in a way that looks incredible. And then you see, someone says, hey, he has 4.45 speed. He looks like it. I mean, he's moving out there. I mean, he's really moving. And they got another guy named Marcelino McCrary Ball we talked about a couple weeks ago. McCrary Ball is a player, and he's undersized, but he flies around. So, man, the Niners right now have their personnel guys have a perfect eye for the kind of linebackers that they want. Fast and physical, who can, run and cover, 3 down guys who can, play if you sub in the sub package. And they got a whole handful of these guys. And I'll make the prediction. I think I made it to you a few weeks ago, but I'll make it again. Why not? I think just the way they traded Jonas Griffith to the Denver Broncos for a day 3 pick at the cut down, they're going to do the same thing this year. I don't know which linebacker. Maybe it'll be Demetrius Flanagan Foles, because, I mean, they're so stacked. And we didn't even mention Oren Burks. Oren Burks looked terrific on the practice field, and he's a special teamer. And Schneider talked about how excited he is to have Oren Burks out there. So now they've got, they've added some special teams aces. And he's just another guy. So, I mean, add to the mix at linebacker. Most teams keep 5, 6. I mean, I don't know how many they're going to keep, but there's more than 5 or 6 good linebackers in this 49er camp. And if you're a pro personnel guy, teams are going to wait to the cut down, or they're going to call the Niners ahead of time and offer future draft picks for one of these linebackers. And I would not be shocked if one of them gets dealt. I hope it's none of the top guys, but I could see a trade coming before the cut down. That's how good the talent is at that position. How about key new addition? Who is your key new addition for the 49ers in this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, the big name is Charvarius Ward, just because, they have a lockdown corner. But I went with Ty Davis Price, and just because they need consistency at running back. And when they did have that in 2019, look what Raheem Mostert did. And I'm not calling TDP the same as Raheem Mostert. He doesn't have the world-class speed or whatever. But when the 49ers are able to turn around and hand the ball off to the same person 15-plus times a game, just like they were able to with Elijah Mitchell last year, they scored plenty of points. I think that's going to be TDP. I think he's going to actually give them a running back who's able to run the ball inside. If you remember how the Packers started to play them as the season went along, other teams started to mimic this as well, where they just take away the edges. And Elijah Mitchell, for whatever reason, couldn't execute by running the ball inside. that kind of stagnated the offense. But that's not going to happen when you have a running back over 200 pounds. That's not, or 220 pounds, I should say. That's not going to happen when you have a running back who's decisive and can break and run through tackles. I think TDP is going to give them the level of consistency on the ground and possibly through the air. And I'm not going to say he's going to be, Marshall Faulk, but just enough where you have to respect it. And that's what they need. They just need a guy who they can rely on every down. And I think that's going to be him.
I'm going to go two guys. I think Danny Gray is going to be a key new addition for the 49ers. I could go Danny Gray or Ray McLeod. I thought McLeod looked incredible in the minicamp, and Gray, obviously, I didn't see him in the minicamp because he had a hammy, which hopefully that's not a recurring thing. But according to the people that were at the rookie minicamp, he looked like a world beater in the rookie minicamp. And I know how fast Danny Gray is. I just think those two guys will give this offense a dynamic feel, or even a more dynamic feel than they already had. But I'm going to say key new addition is Brock Purdy. I think it's Brock Purdy. I'm telling you, man, I am all in on Brock Purdy. And maybe I shouldn't be. I spent over an hour this week looking at Brock Purdy film from Iowa State. And, there's more there than you think. The guy threw for 12,000 yards. There's like no other quarterbacks in this draft that did. He was a 4-year starter. He really good touchdown to interception ratio. Then you look at the measurables. Is he, he's small, but he's not tiny. He's 6'1", 220. Then you look at the scouting reports on him, and they say, it plays with a linebacker's like mentality. He's pretty tough. If anything, he holds the ball a tad too long, but he's tough. And then you listen to some of the coaches, and it's pretty clear that he's smart. And to me, that's where great quarterbacks start. You don't go anywhere if you can't start with smart and tough. If you're not smart and you're not tough, you're not going to be a great quarterback. So the fact that he's smart and tough makes you want to watch more. And then you start watching more and you see the ball comes out on time and he processes things quickly. And he's not really a fear-mongering guy. He keeps his eyes pinned down the field. He's waiting for things to develop. Then you watch him kind of move in the pocket, and they're crisp movements, and he's played a lot of football. He's got 46 career starts. I think there's no doubt in my mind he beats out Sudfeld, and there's no doubt in my mind that Brock Purdy's going to have NFL wins, that he's going to be able to win NFL games. The ball comes out on time with accuracy, and he's the kind of guy that if you watch one practice, you say, well, maybe it's just watch the right practice. When you watch him for a few practices, you realize that his ball placement, Kyle, is so good that he's the kind of guy that could be absolutely incredibly valuable to this 49er team. Why? Because they probably lead the league in weapons who have run after the catch ability. And this guy's ball placement is so good that he puts it right in the spot that will allow you to have run after the catch ability. A lot of people don't realize that the quarterback's accuracy and his ball placement has as much to do with the run after the catch ability as the ability itself. If you lead the guy perfectly, he's 2 steps by the DB. If you throw it behind him and he's got to catch it, he might catch it, but he's going to be tackled. There's no run after the catch. Purdy, going back to Iowa State, puts the ball right where it needs to be for run after the catch, big playability. So I think he's going to beat out Sudfeld. I think Trey's probably going to have an injury. I think they're going to wind up starting Purdy a couple times this year, and I don't think he's going to disappoint in those games. So I'm going to say, even though I love Ray and Danny Gray, and I think Gray has the most impact because I think he'll create the most space, but I think Purdy is going to have a big impact as Mr. Irrelevant. I think he's going to make the team, and I think he's going to be the number 2 quarterback, and I think he can win games.
So let's talk about Larry Krueger, the scout. For those of you that don't know, Larry spent last week at minicamp, and he was very high on Purdy. He thought Purdy played very well. When you do this and you go back to the tape, you have a tendency to see what you want to see. Did Larry Krueger go back and see what he wanted to see, knowing that Purdy just balled out, knowing that Purdy was just like, oh, this kid can play. So now you're looking for traits, the good plays, the things that you want to see. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, which,
yeah, totally. You're looking.
yeah.
It's like the old saying: if your premise is wrong, by definition, your conclusions are wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and I will put it down as, I've been told many times you can see things that aren't real at minicamp, but. I did talk to a buddy of mine who went in there as the road scout a couple of years ago, and he said the kid's all biz. And I said, really? He's like, he's all biz. He's all football. He's all in. And then watching him on the practice field, he's in control, and he's got high standards for himself. And then you see the nuances of the position, and you can see that even though for most rookie quarterbacks, everything's like super fast, this kid's it's slower. I mean, I haven't talked to him one-on-one yet, but you can kind of tell it's not overwhelming to him. He's played a lot of football. I mean, think about Trey Lance. Trey Lance has how many starts in his career? 14, something like that?
Yeah.
This kid's got 46. So he's played a ton of football. But Kyle, it's a great question about you, because there is a little bit of that. There is a little bit of, I'm going back looking for verification, for what I'm seeing on the practice field. And so maybe I am wrong on this guy, but what I see is a guy with a better arm than Mullins, a guy who has the ability to move in the pocket. He's got way better movement ability than I thought. He's smart enough to see that he knows the coverage. So when a lane opens up, he takes it. He's decisive out there. And he's just got some intangibles that you can't teach. There's not his motion. There's not a lot of movement in his motion. There's not a lot of development that has to happen here. And then seeing his interviews, he's very serious but humble. And then I'm thinking, this guy's like 6 feet flat, and he's just too small, and he's got a Nick Mullins type arm, and they'll break on all the in routes. But then you watch him, and you're like, wait a second. He throws a very catchable ball. He's putting it on guys' hands. He's throwing on the run with accuracy. He's completing passes along the sideline in 7-on-7 drills with some zip. I'm not saying he's a superstar,
sure,
but I think he's better than Nate Sudfeld, and I'm pretty confident that once the preseason games get into it, and I'm not even 100% sure if they will anoint him number 2, because they did pay Sudfeld, and if they anoint this kid number 2, then they're going to have to admit that they probably shouldn't have paid Sudfeld that money, and teams don't like to admit mistakes. But all I'm saying is, if Trey goes down, don't be surprised if for any period of time, that's more than just part of a game. If he goes down, and they have to really think about who are we going to go with to win a game, my guess is they'll choose Purdy over Sudfeld.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about just the run after the catch, and we saw it firsthand the last couple of years. When the quarterback doesn't put it on the money, you lose 10 to 15 yards, and those are valuable. So if that's Purdy's strength, and I'm pretty sure one of the strongest parts of his game is that underneath accuracy, and that's what, think about all those crossing routes and in-breaking routes that Shanahan runs, just hitting guys in stride. It sounds so simple, but for whatever reason, they haven't really found a quarterback who can consistently do that.
Who is the player that you and Akash thought would take a leap forward?
Yeah, so as far as taking a leap goes, he liked Ambry Thomas, just with, a year removed from football, 2020, started late last year, started to come along, and then thinking that if he doesn't, there's no pressure on him having to play with Travarius Ward. Mine was Trey Sermon, and I think that he is going to surprise and supplant as RB2. I think for the first time, we're going to see a 49ers running back, or 49ers under Kyle Shanahan, have a consistent third down back. So a guy who can pick up blitzes, a guy who can pass protect, and a guy who Trey Lance can trust out of the backfield, whether that's check downs, whether that's seams out of the backfield, or whether that's deep corners. Or think about it. For a split second, that was going to be Tevin Coleman, but the one game where they actually were able to use him, or he was hurt. I believe that was the Jets game in week 2. And they actually threw him a pass as a slot receiver. So I think Trey Sermon can do that. I think he can bring it to the table. And it is a lot of hope given that they just, drafted a running back in the 3rd round after taking Sermon, after taking Elijah Mitchell. And I know that there are a billion backs on this roster, but I don't think that they can catch the ball like Sermon can. And I think he's going to get a little bit, or he had a little bit of wake-up call last year, and he's going to use that as momentum and really turn that into a specific role in the NFL. And I think that's going to be the best-case scenario for Sermon.
Yeah, no, I like that call too. And Sermon, by the way, looked quicker on the field this year than at any point last year. I mean, there was times he's got nifty feet and he can run through contact and he looks quicker. He's more knowledgeable on the offense. I just think that he looks like primed for a bust out. I'm going to go with the answer the notorious GAV gave here, and that's Talanoa Hufanga. I think Hufanga is the bust out player. What was he last year? He was a special teamer, and he played a little bit from scrimmage. Now they've moved away from Tart. They've opened up that position. It's his. It's absolutely his. I mean, the other guys at his position are George Odom, Taylor Hawkins, maybe Leon O'Neal, maybe Tarvarius Moore. I think Hufanga is quite a bit better than all those guys. And I like Hufanga as the breakout player. I just see a guy who, he's in a good space mentally, and he's just a great football player. He's a great football player who, has some limitations athletically, but a year into their system, a year into their training, a year into lifting, a year into conditioning and all the diet and everything, I think he's picked up a step and a half. And I think he's going to have a bust out year. I think we're going to be talking about him as one of the key players on the defense this year. I think Hufanga showed it last year. It really just shows that every time they get together, he just gets a little bit better. And then when you hear him talk and you hear guys talk about him, D'Amico was glowing in his praise of Hufanga. And then Hufanga himself, just, you can see he's prideful and he's appreciative that Tart and Tavon Wilson and Jimmy Ward took him under their collective wing last year and brought him along, and he's ready to make that next step. And I can't wait to watch it. It's gonna be fun.
What's a breakout year look like for Hufanga?
I think a guy who starts all year and makes a ton of tackles. I think he's going to be the guy who limits other teams' run after the catch. The same way we're talking about quarterbacks. Yeah, quarterbacks, can, their accuracy can lead to more run after the catch. Well, safeties like Hufanga, who have unbelievable timing, can just almost eliminate all run after the catch. And I think he'll do that this year.
He's the guy who comes out of the middle of the field or out of the roof and rallies to the tackle and jumps up and down as he makes a 4-yard tackle on 3rd and 7 and they have to punt. Like, that's what you're envisioning.
Yeah, I absolutely am. And not only that, I just think that safety, if they can stay healthy between Ward and Hufanga, I think you got something there, man. I think Ward I thought of all the players on the field, I thought he looked the best as far as, he just looked like if the game was coming up this weekend, he'd be ready to go. He was ripped. He was in incredible shape. He was flying around. I mean, I can see why the coaches hold him and, have such in high regard. It's just Jimmy Ward is exactly what you want. Isn't it funny how when the coaches started to like him years ago, it took a while for the fans to kind of warm to him. I think we're all now seeing what the coaches saw years ago, that this guy's just in the right place at the right time. And he's physical and he's fast and he's smart, and it's just, he's got all the traits that you're looking for. I mean, D'Amico talked about how he's got all pro type talent. He just hasn't been an all pro yet. And he used the word yet. So they obviously love him. And it's, if you watched him in the minicamp, you're like, he stood out. I mean, he would have stood out from a satellite. I mean, that's how ripped and in shape and flying around this guy was. I mean, it was something to see. How about take a leap? Who's the guy that's going to take a huge leap forward in your mind?
Yeah, so that was the Thomas and Trey Sermon one. So we did We also did Prove It Year.
Oh, Prove It Year. Okay.
And so think about it. Mike McGlinchey's been punching bag for a lot of the fans. He's coming off a season-ending injury. He's not in a contract year. They already picked up his 5th-year option. So if he doesn't perform this year, they don't have to re-sign him. They could let him walk and get a comp pick. So Akash went with Mike McGlinchey, which makes a ton of sense. I went with Emmanuel Mosley when he's not a punching bag at all. And I actually think he's a very good player. I think he's probably a CB2 at best, but you need CB2s all over the place. So he's in the final year of his contract. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent next offseason. They drafted 2 cornerbacks in each of the previous 2 drafts. So Mosley is officially on notice after signing Charvarius Ward as well. So I think this is going to be kind of a make it or break it year for Mosley. He can make himself a ton of money. He's in a great position, great defensive line, has a number 1 cornerback. So now he gets to shadow number 2s. Do you remember, what was his name? Darrell Williams, I believe, from the Rams a couple years ago?
Yeah.
So he's a guy who had a huge year and got paid. So Mosley could do like that when he's CB2, takes advantage of the defensive line, gets a bunch of picks, like that sort of thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mosley has that type of season. But, I mean, I would say the pressure's on for him to perform.
Darius Williams. That was Darius.
Williams,
Yeah.
Right.
I forgot it was Darius. To me, it's a couple guys. One, it's Javon Kinlaw. I mean, when Javon Kinlaw's got the world of ability, and he to me is the kind of the in the prove it year. And I'll tell you the other guy that I think is not necessarily in a prove it year, but I think he's going to go out there and prove that he doesn't have as much focus on him as a Kinlaw. I think if you asked 100 Niner fans, maybe 70 or 60 or 70 may say Kinlaw. Very few would say this guy because the expectations aren't there. But as far as a player who's going to be, who I think is kind of in a prove it year and showed some good things in minicamp and looks like he might be a guy ready to step into a much more significant role this year, is Charles Omenihu. Charles Omenihu, the former Texas defensive lineman who went to Houston and the 49ers made the trade for him, 6'5", 280. But man, if this guy's 280, it's the most he carries that weight so naturally. He looks like 260 on the field. I mean, if you told me he's 280 and I believe it, that's all because he's got this crazy frame. But if Omenihu is in camp, motivated and in shape, and let's say he's a little south of 280, man, he could be a wrecking ball. He's got a great body for the game. He's now in the system. He understands the system. He's had an off season under Coach Herrick. They've had, he's not just walking into a room that's all established, the pecking order. Now he's going to have a camp, off season and everything. I just think there's a lot of talent there. And I think that was a really good addition. Now, he played well last year, but I think that was just the tip of the iceberg. I think Omenihu is going to find a whole nother level to get to this year.
I could not agree more. So Akash actually chose Kameko Toure as one of the key new additions, just because there's going to be a pass rusher who's going to have a chance to break out this year. Arden Key was the guy last year. It was Kerry Hyder the year before. So when you play on this team, when you have a defensive line coach like Chris Kosaric, he's going to maximize you. Now they have Armstead, who's an all-pro. They have Bosa, who's an all-pro. So there's going to be a guy who's going to live in one-on-ones, and I think it's going to be Charles Omenihu. I think with that frame, with that athleticism that you said, he's going to just overwhelm guards inside, and we're going to see slowly but surely him start to play 20, 25, 35, and all of a sudden by midseason, by the end of the year, he's playing half of the snaps, and he's the guy we're wondering, get him on the field. Let's go. Get to third down. That way Charles Omenihu can come in, and you just know he's going to wreak havoc. His athleticism profile already is so good, and with another year with Chris Kosaric and playing next to those guys that I mentioned, I just have a hard time seeing him fail in the situation that he's in now. And to be fair, he was productive with on a bad Texans team, and in limited snaps last year with the 49ers, you already saw the flashes. So I think he's going to be better than all these guys, Toure, Hyder, all the backups.
One comment from the chat, Corbin Smith says, Krug, you're crushing it, bro. Great work getting all these beat guys collaborating. Appreciate what you're doing. Well, as you can tell, Kyle is incredibly knowledgeable. And the guys, I'll say this. The promise that I'm making to every person in the chat and every person who's checking our stuff out is I'm not putting anybody on my show who doesn't know their shit. If you don't know your stuff, you ain't going to be on this show. You can be on other shows, but you're not going to be on this show. So I just really appreciate the guys who we have had on the show because they do know their stuff. And when you know your stuff, guess what? Guys like Kyle Posey are in high demand. And the fact that we can get them every week is feather in our cap, and we're thrilled to have them. Let me finish one last one. We're an hour in. So when we finish right here, I got one last one. Looking at the Niner plan for this summer, and we're looking at it from the outside in, so we don't know. It's not like we're sitting there with Lynch and Shanahan mapping out the plan, but let's just say based on what we're seeing of the plan, based on the rookie minicamp, the draft, the minicamps, and what we perceive as the plan going forward, is there what aspect of the 49ers plan for the upcoming season would you say, I'm just not sure and I'm a little bit nervous? Is there any aspect of what they've done at any position personnel-wise gearing up for this attempt to go to the Super Bowl and win it? What part of their plan that you can discern right now are you like, I don't know. I'll wait and see. I'm not ready to pan it and say they're wrong or they've screwed up, but you know what? I'm just not sure. Is there a part of something they've done or a player they're leaning on or a position group where maybe you don't think it's as fortified as it needs to be? What's your primary concern or question? Here we are, mid-June, about a month before training camp.
Yeah, I think there's a couple. And for me, I haven't seen safety, so I don't know what Talanoa Hufanga looks like. In my mind, he still looks like the guy who Cliff Kingsbury went out of his way to get one-on-one with his wide receivers down the field and take advantage. I think John Lynch told us in the State of the Union that, they wanted a safety, so they wanted to address that position and they weren't able to. The other one would be having your first-year starting quarterback be protected by 3 unknowns up the middle. It would be great to get a guy like J.C. Tretter. That way, you have a veteran. Like they were talking up Jake Brendel. Yes, he's been in the league for a while. He hasn't played significant football since 2018. Like that matters. And we're talking about Aaron Banks and Jalen Moore, who could be very good, who might be very good, but we don't know that yet. So there's we don't have any proof, and that's hard to give them the benefit of the doubt, knowing that there's going to be bumps and bruises for Trey Lance. He's going to be up and down and probably a bit of a roller coaster early on. To take that pressure off him, having a veteran, being able to call the blitzes and protections up front in front of him would make a big difference. So I want to see how they work offensive line. I understand it's probably going to be a work in progress, which I wouldn't mind if knowing that the quarterback wasn't going to be going through the same thing. What about you?
I think 2 areas really. One, it's center with Jake Brendel. I mean, the fact that he looks good and this and that. Okay. But I mean, you're talking about a guy who doesn't have a lot of credentials, who doesn't have a lot of experience. Just because a guy's athletic and had some athletic traits doesn't necessarily mean he's a productive NFL starting offensive lineman who can make the calls. So I'm kind of nervous about Jake Brendel and Aaron Banks. Banks at left guard, Brendel at center. And Banks' ability to just stay out there and produce and Brendel's ability to do the same. I mean, those 2 spots to me, left guard and center. And then also, I know how great DJ Jones was anchoring against the run. And I got to see Kinlaw do it. I've got to see him stay on the field, play with, play, first of all, just be out there, but then also play with leverage and stay low and play and not just be big and strong, but actually be functionally productive at the point of attack against against the run. So that's my question. Can Kinlaw stop the run inside? Because they absolutely need him to do that. And can Brendel and Banks be, starters and dependable starters in front of Trey? I guess I'll give Brunskill a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. But I mean, I don't think he's a world beater. So I guess I'd have concern about all three guys. But more specifically, I don't know what Banks is going to do. I don't know if Banks can play. And I don't know if what Brendel's going to do. And I don't know that Brendel can play. And I like Javon Kinlaw as a prospect, but I don't know that he can stay healthy and anchor against the run the way that DJ did. And those are the three guys, Banks, Brendel, and Kinlaw, right in the trenches, right in the middle. Kyle, I'll say it. If those three guys are all go, let's say Banks plays like a second round pick and he looks really good, and Brendel seamlessly takes over from Mack and is either an upgrade or not much of a downgrade, and Kinlaw steps right in and plays the run soundly and stays on the field, I think this is a really good football team. I think it's a deep roster with a lot of talent and a lot more explosiveness at running back, wide receiver. I think it's without a doubt, you'd have to say on paper, they've improved their special teams. They have a new coordinator. They've signed McLeod, and they brought in Oren Burks, and they've got George Odom, and they've got some guys there, and they've invested there. So that was a weakness. Let's say it's improved. But if those three guys, Brendel, Banks, and Kinlaw, are all up to it, I think this is a team that there is no limits for, that they're, I know it's Trey and he's young. We got to see it. I get all that. But to me, if those three guys in the interior can play, watch out. Niners could contend for another ring.
Yeah, I don't think it's out of the question that they win a playoff game if those guys up the middle. So the last thing you want to have is question marks up the middle. And I think it's more of an unknown than anything, as you said. So that's why we're here. But that's what makes it fun, right? So Banks could be – so we've seen rookie linemen come in the last couple of years and perform very well. So there is hope for Banks. And let's not act like just because he didn't play, he'll be a bust. So, but again, that's what makes it fun, the unknown.
Actually, one last thought, since I see it in the chat here from Saul Rubio. Saul Rubio says, Larry Krueger, what is your take on Jimmy G still possibly going to Carolina or Cleveland? Which one seems more likely to you? There's also a lot of talk about Seattle. I don't know, man. I'll say this. You talk to the quarterbacks. Hey, have you talked to Jimmy? No. You talk to Brock Purdy. Hey, you talk to the quarterbacks? Yeah, I talked to Sudfeld and Lance. Oh, have you talked to Jimmy? No. I mean, not like, oh, not yet. No. Just blank stare. No. Assistant coaches come to the podium. Hey, have you talked to Jimmy? No. I mean, it's like nobody's had any connection to Jimmy. There's no indication at all from anybody in Santa Clara that Jimmy Garoppolo will ever take the field for the 49ers again. That being said, we've talked about this topic to death, as you know. Where's he going to wind up? Jimmy's going to play for who?
I don't think it's going to be Seattle. That makes the most sense just right now in the immediate future if they want to, I guess, compete, because he is better than Geno Smith. He is worlds better than Drew Lock. If I'm Carolina, I'm not going that direction just because I know my fate is tied to whoever is at quarterback. So it's tough, man. But I would say Carolina. If I'm Carolina at the same time, I wouldn't touch Baker either. I think Jimmy is worlds better than Baker. I don't know. I just don't see it with Baker. I never have. I would have never taken him in the first round, let alone the number one overall pick. To me, how Baker's played in the NFL has been exactly who he has been since college, since his Texas Tech days. And I feel like people are finding out the hard way. I would say Carolina. What about you? And when I say Carolina, it wouldn't surprise me if he went to Seattle. Cleveland feels like just, if Watson gets suspended for the year and they're not able to mend their relationship with Baker, so Jimmy's the only other option. So the 49ers, in a weird way, have options, but I think Carolina makes the most sense.
I think it's going to be Cleveland. I think somehow Baker winds up in Carolina and Jimmy winds up in Cleveland, and I'm not sure how, but I think the 49ers wind up moving him to Cleveland. I can't see them just letting him, just waiving him and having him go to Seattle, but it would make sense if they felt like, hey, they were going to waive him and they were worried about him going to Seattle. It would make sense that they would hold him until July, because that would kind of force him to not go to Seattle and start to learn their system. And maybe there's a competitive advantage from that. I hope they're not in that mode, because I don't want to see Jimmy in Seattle. I think they, with the 2 new tackles and the receivers they have and the run game with Kenneth Walker, I don't know. I could see Jimmy going there and potentially leading them to the playoffs. And I think if I'm John Lynch, I'd be, that's not what I want to see necessarily, especially if you're going with Trey Lance and there's a ramp up period of any kind. I mean, you want to have Niners Nation turn on you, not the website, but the actual fans. Just have Jimmy wind up in Seattle, have them sweep you, wind up in the playoffs while you're falling short of the playoffs. I mean, that almost is like the ticket to have Niner fans rise up and say, get rid of Lynch. So I got to think that they've got something planned for Jimmy in the AFC. And I'll guess Browns. But at this point, it's a guess. And then how do the Browns afford that with all the money they're paying Deshaun? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's even viable from the cap perspective, but I could see it as far as, tough Midwestern kid. They're looking for a leader with maybe Deshaun suspended. I could see Jimmy in a tough situation, having, he's kind of proved himself here as far as toughness and distractions. And maybe if you're Cleveland, you say, you know what, this guy has proven he can play solid football amid distractions. Nothing's going to be more of a distraction than what we've got here. Let's go for Jimmy. So I'll say Browns, but I don't have a strong lean either way. At this point, I'm just going Browns because I'm running out of teams. But hey, tell us what's going on Niners Nation wise. If people go to Niners Nation on the web and they check it out, what is up there right now, and what are you working on for the upcoming week?
So I think we're just going to have a couple more profiles up there, but Rob's on vacation. He's our podcast guy. I'm going on vacation next week. So this, like we just talked about at the top, this is the one time where we're actually going to step away, detox from football a little bit, and we'll get back to it probably in a couple weeks or so.
Well, do we always enjoy getting your perspective? Enjoy a much well-deserved vacation, and we'll catch up with you as we get closer to July and training camp. Good to hear from you as always. Have a great weekend.
Love it. Looking forward to it, man. Take care. Have a good weekend.
You too, man.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah, we ain't never fall back.